Welcome to Rich Conversations. I would like to share 5 books that have influenced me greatly over the past 5 years. Here we have 5 books in no particular order, except this order. Sacred Hoops by Phil Jackson. Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. We have Revolution in the Head, The Beatles' Records and the 60s by MacDonald. Nothing and Everything by Pearlman, and Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. So I thought I would just go through these and briefly summarize each one. Sacred Hoops by Phil Jackson is essentially the outline of how Phil Jackson coached the Chicago Bulls to their first three-peat in the 90s. And the big takeaway from this is awareness. We see what's happening. We get out of our heads. We see what's happening so then we can react to it. Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. This is one of the most influential books I've read in my life. There's like a clear how I approach life before this book and how I approach life after this book. It's that important. Harari wrote Sapiens, which is a brief history of humankind, while Homo Deus is the future of humankind. And one of the big things that he highlights is we're at a point now in the human species where our top priorities on the human agenda are we want to live longer, healthier, and happier. So a lot of the decisions and everything that's going on in the world is kind of trying to solve those problems. You know, we've come a long way from war, famine, disease. We've done a really good job at reducing, limiting those. So we're at a really interesting point of the human species. But now with Homo Deus, it's technology, right? And I was someone before this book who was very romantic, and technology is getting in the way of our human experience and interaction, and I'm so frustrated with it, blah, blah, blah. Well, technology is not stopping. It's not slowing down. So I can either acknowledge that and better educate myself, better understand it, and live with that approach moving forward, or I can just be frustrated all the time. Homo Deus is a lot about how we implement technology into our lives as humans. I would say since I read this book, I feel I've done a really good job of identifying the technology and using it to enhance and empower my own life. Like, not let technology own me, but I run technology in my life. And I'm really excited about a lot of the things that I do and that I've implemented from this. This is Revolution in the Head, The Beatles, Records, and the 60s. I'm a huge Beatles fan. This is my favorite Beatles book written that I've read so far. And this is basically about the correlation between the Beatles records in particular, their songs, and the correlation of the 60s decade. The 60s decade is, to me, one of the most fascinating times in American history or world history. And so this book, it really does a good job of just weaving in this correlation. I think this book does a pretty good job of identifying the interconnectedness between culture and politics and a decade in itself and its kind of identity. I've read this book 3 times in the past 5 years, and to me, what is so interesting is that kind of like cultural movement in a way, and it triggers ideas in my mind of what a cultural movement would look like in the 2020s. Like, what are we going through now politically, culturally? What will it look like, and how can we influence it? To me, I think technology has pretty much grabbed us by the throat and has led the way. What I'm curious about is collectively we take a look at technology, but be more intentional with it And instead of living kind of sans serif lives, where everything is stripped down, everything is minimal, it's taken away that human element, we get closer to nature again and what is natural, and identifying what is unnatural and staying away from it. So something I've done is I'm really more into like floral patterns, living within nature and universal laws. I think that's something on the horizon. So that's what I think about with Revolution in the Head, and how culture and politics and everything is so interrelated. This is Nothing and Everything by Ellen Pearlman, and this is the influence of Buddhism on the American avant-garde from 1942 to 1962. Pretty specific, right? This has been pretty influential on me with the idea of substance in emptiness, in nothing. And the whole concept I've really used in my writing, I would say. Even when we started this recording, what did we say? We said, here's 5 books in no particular order except this order, right? It's like using this duality, right? And we can use that duality to better to like simplify and clarify life. So if I were to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm not doing, it's just one difference of a word, but it clarifies everything, right? If in life we decide exactly what we're doing, we can also identify what exactly we are not doing. And we can apply this with a bunch of things in life. Now, this is through art, so like Jackson Pollock is involved, John Cage, and this book is a lot about how ideas from the East came in through the West, and how a lot of artists and musicians and people in the avant-garde used those ideas in their work. This is The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. One of my inspirations, Jane Jacobs. She was an urban activist in the 1960s in New York, and this book just kind of reaffirms what I believe, and that's we should feel and see what is happening on the ground of what things are and what is a community, what is a city, rather than oftentimes you get people at the top that say this is how it is, right? So it's more of a bottom-up approach compared to top-down. And for me, I love traveling to different cities and just looking around, getting a sense of the culture. From the crack on the sidewalk, right, to graffiti on a sign, to the public transportation, a rapper on the floor, to the style and architecture of buildings. Everything is interconnected and everything is telling a story. So she's been a big influence on me, and it's something I'm aware of and I take with me outside of my apartment every day when I step outside. So it's about seeing what's on the ground. That's what's happening. And what is the story on the ground? That's where there's often a disconnect from the people on the ground to the people on the top. So that's been 5 books that have influenced me over the past 5 years. Hope you enjoyed.